Welcome to Face the State. I'm Ariana Bennett. Thank you for joining us. Well, thousands of new residents are flooding into the Reno area every year as our economy improves. Now, the increased demand for housing has driven prices up, so much so that it's pricing a huge portion of our population out of even apartment rentals. In the last year alone, rent for an apartment in the Reno area went up 14%. So, what's contributing to this problem and what can be done about it? Kim Robinson and Sharon Zadra are here to talk about these big issues with us. Thank you both so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Okay, you guys are in the weeds on this issue. So tell me what your general impression of the health of our housing market is in terms of how well it's fitting the needs of our community.
Sure. I think one of the things that we know is in terms of the needs of our community, they're changing quite a bit. And by that I mean our demographics. So we've got new workers moving in, we have an aging population, but we also have the rise of the millennials. And so the types of houses or types of housing we should say, that folks are looking for is really changing. And we don't have much of that here in our community. Approximately 54% of our housing inventory is actually single family homes. So we talk about something called the missing middle housing that describes those different options that could be there. And they're also at different price points.
Right, so what you're talking about is basically we have a lot of single family homes on decent sized lots and not a lot of higher density buildings like either high-rise apartment buildings or 3-story apartment buildings. Definitely not enough to fill the need as it has changed.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Sharon, anything to add to that?
Yeah, we've recognized that times were changing for quite a while. We just really weren't ready to step up to the plate because the demand wasn't there at the time. When I served on the Reno City Council, we initiated, because of the regional plan, our master plans had to conform. We initiated the first TOD, the Transit-Oriented Corridor and Transit-Oriented Development, which was supposed to rise up and have the mixed-use development where there was a lot more of the retail and commercial close to transportation hubs, a new style of living, and the multifamily. And we put those into place, but we really didn't refine them quickly enough to adapt to the changing market.
So the situation we're looking at now, as we're in this time of change, how big of a problem is housing and how long can we expect it to be a problem?
It's huge. Kim's operation does surveys annually, and from Truckee Meadows Healthy Communities, we base all of our operations off of a community health needs assessment, which we are currently updating. So the 18 through 20 report will be telling us what people need. So we have to rely on current data and some restrictions of what we can do with that data as it relates to demographers and federal regulations. That's kind of a challenge. The policy piece is really the most challenging piece, initiating policy to support the needs that we have.
So the concern is real.
Absolutely.
Very.
And I think when we talk about how long we have to kind of solve this problem, this is not a problem that also occurred overnight. So this is something that has been building, I would say, for a while in terms of the types of homes that we have been building or the types of housing. We haven't diversified earlier, as Sharon mentioned.
Now, Kim, Regional Planning did a survey kind of on housing inventory and the basic need, and there were a lot of really interesting findings from this, but is there anything in particular that really stood out to you from that report?
Yes, actually. The thing that really surprised us the most was that the cost of having a single family home has risen by 60% over the past 2 decades, but wages have only risen by 17%. And so what we really noticed with that is this mismatch around the cost versus what people are actually earning.
And it's an issue, especially in a situation where our construction industry got gutted during the recession, and developers are a little gun shy, and so the building of new properties is happening more slowly than it needs to for the number of people coming in. So the inventory is extremely low, and the prices are just going up because people are having to compete for housing, which is never a good situation if you are a renter or a buyer. Maybe it's good for the landlords, not so much for the renters. I mean, if we look at supply, I mean, a really small amount too is that high density stuff that we need that ends up being a little bit less expensive. 9% now, I think, in the high density.
That's right.
So what would you say is a healthy number that we need to get to in order to be meeting that demand? What's a healthy rate that maybe we see in other cities?
I think that's an interesting question, and I think it depends on each locale. And that's one of the reasons that we've teamed up with Truckee Meadows Healthy Communities, is to be able to engage with enterprise community partners and bring them in to help us understand the dynamics of our particular situation and our region. So they recently completed work in the city of Oakland and talked a lot about all the different types of housing needs that they had there. They're going to be able to help us, we think, understand exactly what we need here.
So we don't have a ballpark yet of where we need to get in terms of how much higher density housing.
No, but I would say it's coming soon.
We're very close.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, but suffice to say, we definitely need more.
Absolutely.
And the difference is we're now recognizing that we really do need to approach this on a regional level and a comprehensive approach. We've had lots of players, interested players, trying to do what they could right now without really looking at the full scope. And we need to step back just a little bit, take a look at all the data that is available and what we can do, and that think outside of the box. I know that's kind of an overused statement, but we really do. We've actually worked quite a bit. We've had several conversations both at the state and federal level. You know, oftentimes it's not considered that those two jurisdictions could also be of help to us, and they certainly can be. So what we're trying to do is bring together all of the partners who have been involved in one way or another, take a look at what everyone is doing, what data is available, and make one massive, comprehensive review and put together a strategy that can satisfy over a long period of time and solve the issue.
So once we get past the meeting and discussions and the data phase and it comes to actually doing, do we have an idea of what regional planning is capable of actually changing and how much is necessarily left up to the free market?
Well, we can certainly talk about the policies that can be embedded in the regional plan. So the regional plan, it looks at development broadly over our region and growth, and all of the master plans for the jurisdictions, the Reno, Sparks, Washoe County, and transportation, water, they need to come into conformance with the regional plan. So by starting at that level, at that upper level, and describing here's some of the needs that we have, we are confident that it will be embedded into the various plans, and that's where implementation happens on the ground.
Is that then zoning? Like if we zone for the types of housing that we want?
We get to zoning through the jurisdictions, that's absolutely right. We talk about it at master plan level, at the regional level, but zoning is where we get to, yes.
Yeah, because I noticed when I was looking at the study that part of the issue with development is the open space for development is zoned for low density or medium density housing. So the type of housing basically that we have plenty of and don't really need. It's not zoned for higher density housing. So is that a difficult thing to change, and will it change?
Yeah, I think you bring up an excellent point, which is that what we found in our study is there's approximately 83,000 units that could be built that are already in some form of approval process right now. But most of them, as you described, these kind of single family on larger lots. Can they be changed? Yes, they can. Is it easy to change? There's conversations that need to happen. Some of that's going to be conversation around infrastructure. Certainly, if we want to do more infill and redevelopment in the downtown centers, we need to talk about being able to address the pipes issues, the water and sewer pipe issues, because those are aging.
Right, and then when you talk about building on the outskirts, then you have the transportation issue, not just the congested roads getting to and from those areas, but also the cost that people incur who are already struggling to pay for rent and driving into town for their jobs, right?
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons that we're championing the idea that 30%, which is what's considered to be affordable in terms of monthly income for a family, 30% for housing cost, we think that should be housing and transportation cost combined.
Yeah, and right now I saw that like 50% of renters, half of renters are already paying more than that 30%, which is not really an economically viable position to be in if you want to have any cushion. So it's already putting people paycheck to paycheck, and that's without these continually rising rent costs. So it seems to me to be a pretty dire issue.
And we're trying to change the formula of how we identify what we need to do. We've got many partners. The food bank is an example. They're even rethinking their strategy. People need sustainable food, but the reason why they need it so desperately is because they're spending up to 55% of their income on housing. So they're even changing their focus on what they address, you know, the social services of what they address to the affordable housing piece, and then that will parlay down to allow people to have a more economic, stable family and food available if they're not spending 55% on housing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, we've just got a couple minutes left, but I do want to get to this fun hypothetical. So, if you were to get exactly the system that you think would make for the healthiest housing situation in our area, wave a magic wand, what would it look like and how possible is it?
Oh, that is a dreaming big question, and I love that. I love that approach. I would say that while I don't fully know exactly everything that I would want, I would definitely want to see more parity around the types of housing that is available and the prices that are afforded. I personally would want to see more transit. That also means more funding for transit, right, at the same time. And is it possible? Yes, I think it's possible. And I definitely think that's one of the reasons that we've teamed up and, again, are working with enterprise community partners. Really, this is something that's happening across the country, and we know that there are solutions out there.
They've brought those solutions to communities that have, if you can imagine, even worse, kind of a worse situation than us. Ours is just much more condensed, and what really complicates ours is that we have 3 local municipalities that we have to bring into an aligned, cohesive agreement of how to approach it. And then, of course, working with those other jurisdictions. That makes us pretty distinctive. What it's going to require is taking the ego out of it and the ownership out of it. We really do need to work on a regional basis, not an individual one, where we rely on each of the jurisdictions to do what they need for a smaller view. We need to approach it system-wide and bring solutions.
Okay, well, we are just about out of time, but I'll give a couple seconds if you guys have a last message that you'd like people to take away from this.
I think the message for me is that this affordability issue is real and that we all need to work together.
And we need to understand, many people used to think of affordable housing, yes, those people. It is now housing that is affordable. People who earn $60,000 or $65,000 a year are homeless now. They cannot afford housing. So it isn't those people that the perception of the community is.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, thank you both so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, well, coming up on Face the State, if everything we just discussed sounds all too familiar to you, it's good to know that there are local resources that help people afford their housing. I will sit down with some of them right after the break.